today we have a very good friend, someone who I love spending time with, and also someone who I learn a shitload from every time we catch up. Capital S there. Dr. Zac Seidler. Mate, thank you so much for making the time to hang out with me this Arvo.
Mate, it's a pleasure and a privilege. No pressure at all to teach anyone anything, so we'll just see how that goes. Yeah.
Well, that does come with the title.
It does.
The variety of titles.
That's the only reason I wanted doctor. It's like now I get to lecture everyone for funsies. Yeah,
but isn't that the art? Is you now get to tell people what to do, but you don't have to abide by it.
No. Not at all. And no one can ever tell me what to do. That's the way it works.
Look at the doctor. Well, today, mate, I really wanted to... We'll talk about men's mental health is going to be the theme of today. And you are someone who has a very unique balance where you're on the front line. You also have an academic background. You're also just a guy who's navigated growing up in the changing kind of gender conversations as well. So you've got your own lived experience there. And then also you're just curious, like you do your own personal work. And so I think today's going to be awesome. No pressure. But we'll go to wherever we go to. And what I also love about our conversations is that they hit some edges. And today we likely will. And as I always say, is like, this isn't about being politically correct, but it's actually about us leaning into the uncomfortability and just finding out what happens and being responsible in that too, of course.
We're just going to talk stuff.
Hey, nice. Good work. Real stuff.
Real stuff.
Hashtag real stuff. Real stuff 15 on the website.
Amen.
People would be familiar with you. Some people won't. You have a bit of a profile across a variety of media channels, which is awesome. But I'd love to just hear from you, like, in as long as you want. Who is Dr. Zac Seidler?
Wow. What a journey that it's funny that these questions always trigger, with Dylan and friends. That was one of the first times that I've been like, all right, I'm just going to open my mouth and see where this takes me. And then you end up someone, you're like, oh, and now I'm saying this. And I didn't actually realize that was a really integral part of my story, but it came up first. It was like my brain decided on that. So that was, pretty interesting. Who am I? Where do I come from? So pretty much got into the mental health space for, as you said, a number of interlacing reasons. The first is that there are not enough male voices in this space. There are lots of lived experience male voices, thankfully, more and more coming out, talking about what the shit that they've been through and how they coped and what happened. But there don't seem to be many people who are leading the way when it comes to being on the ground as a psychologist, which is my training, and trying to go, I can show you that this is life. Like, this is how it works. I know what you've been through. I'm just another dude. I have the training, thankfully, to understand the connection between some of this stuff, but I'm no different to you in many ways. And so, firstly, it was pretty much when I was, in high school, I was like, I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't want to be a doctor. I'm curious and I love learning shit, and those seem to be the only pathways to go down. And so I just decided, I remember going to my careers counsellor and I was like, I think I want to do psychology. And she was like, boys don't do that. And I was like, sick, I'm definitely going to do it. Thank you for that.
She actually knew that?
Yeah, that was it. That was the first thing that people said. It's like first year psych, it's like you and 1,000 women. That's just how it always looks.
Yeah.
But there was definitely a decision pretty early on after she said that. And then she goes, you have to go to Brisbane. And I was like, I don't think you know how to be a careers counsellor. You've said everything incorrect right now.
And so your psychology degree began.
Yeah. And so we had a long chat, her and I. And I just decided that there was something innately within me that, when it came to the way that people react and interact with one another was just astounding to me, always. And especially the way that guys did, I went to a co-ed school and I'm very thankful for that. But just watching the way that guys and girls interacted. And I did lots of drama and music and stuff. And so I was constantly coming back and being the open ear to the girls and then being like, please break this down for me. What is happening here? And I was as intrigued. I was like, I have no idea what that is, And so I just started watching in a hopefully non-creepy way, the way that dudes were, because I played sport as well and tried to gather like what was going on here and why when I was with my mates, we acted so differently than when we were around girls as well. So there was clearly that tension at the start, and then I realized that I just love stories, you know, and I love just seeing human potential, I guess, in many ways. I have a very high expectation of myself. I blame my parents. Yo. And there's, you know, I'm one of 4 siblings, you know, there's 4 of us, and we're very competitive and driven. And so it was pretty early on, it was an understanding that I can have an internal narrative that can go, all right, here are all of my thoughts, and I am the only one who is going to be able to do anything with these. You know, I'm the one who's going to go, this is too much. This is something I can't do. This is something that I want to be able to get a grasp on. And so I started to build out this understanding of like drive and determination and diligence, I guess, in some ways as well. Triple Ds. And started to understand that I could help others to go, what are the bounds of my fucking capacity? And who told me that these are the way? And I'm very thankful again, because my family embedded within me this belief that there are no bounds, and just go out and seek and see what happens. So all of this was happening as I was growing up. I was also fucking anxious at the time, like had no idea what was going on, but put on a brave face and continued to go, oh, if I actually can give to others, it gives me a sense of purpose. And so reinvented myself, I guess, in that way, because I didn't feel powerless and out of control in those settings when people are like unloading on me, which was beautiful, but also comes with its own shit that we've spoken about before, which is, you know, how do you learn to love yourself and look after yourself in those ways? So all that was happening in high school. Didn't really realize. I'm only dealing with this in retrospect now. I'm like, when people go, how did you end up here? I'm like, oh, let me create this narrative.
Convenient.
Convenient narrative. I like to think that some of it is true. But there's definitely like a piecing a puzzle together to be like, I have no idea how this all happened. Because it did feel like, oh, I'm just going to do this because this just feels like the thing to do, rather than purposeful. But in hindsight, you make decisions based on various shit that is coming your way. Got into, the journey that is psychology. Most people don't last past first year when they realize that there's 1,000 chicks, and it's just, this is fun and now I have to do some work.
And a lot of stats.
Exactly, a lot of stats. But push through, and people go, how did you, because it goes from like 3,000 people in first year, at Sydney Uni, to there's probably 80 of us in honours, and then there's 20 in masters, and then there's 10 in PhD or whatever. And I just didn't have a plan B. I don't think I'm by any means any better than anyone. I didn't have any different skills. I just said, fuck it, this is what's happening. There's no other way around this. And I had a clear narrative that I was going to fill a gap, that I was going to come into a space that needed someone to speak authentically in what is, a male suicide epidemic in many ways, that is, boys just having no fucking idea what is going on. And I also realized, the amount that I swear, for instance, which is my favorite part of myself, is that people go to me, when they meet me, if I go on a date, someone goes, I really didn't expect you to talk like that. You're like, you got a doctorate, blah, blah. And I was like, if I can't talk to everybody, I can talk to nobody. If I'm a fucking lab coat, how well did that turn out for the past, of psychology and psychiatry? You wonder why everyone hates us. It's because we sat in an ivory tower and told everyone what to do. I will very clearly set out who I am, that I have shortcomings, that I don't know what the fuck is going on, but I've worked out over time certain patterns, and I can help you in that direction. So I never wanted to be, someone who believed himself to have all the answers. But I did see that just by interacting in a genuine way that I could connect with others. So continued all the way through the 10-year journey that is this shit show to become a psychologist. But meanwhile was doing, my PhD in male depression and suicide. And it was really extremely meaningful to me to understand the links between that and masculinity in more of a nuanced way than we tend to talk about at the moment, which is kind of like men don't talk, men don't reach out. That's why they die. I don't buy that. I never will. There are so many intertwining factors that are underpinning this stuff. And I just felt like the narrative, especially in the media, when I was going through, and somewhat to today, was just so simplistic that it kind of was disrespectful to those who had died, So that really drove me. The reason in many ways, I guess, and this is another thing retrospectively, as you know, I lost my dad to suicide while I was doing honours. So before I decided to embark on this PhD journey looking at masculinity and suicide. And it was, as I said, I did it because of how he lived, not because of how he died. It was something that really, he was so filled with life, and he had so many ideas, and just, believed, he was a doctor, believed wholeheartedly in science, and asked questions and was so curious. And so it felt like the best way to honour his legacy was to go, what the fuck happened? And it wasn't in a way that was like, I'm going to do this to try and help my own grief, which I'm very thankful for. I think I would have sunk if that had happened. And I've witnessed that. And I try to help those who are going into this stuff to seek answers. I did it to stop it happening to others rather than to understand what happened to him, because I think I kind of knew what was going on. So that was a really important journey. And really, I'm only realizing now, as I get these opportunities to reflect on it, how I've really come to terms with so much just by doing that work, and by getting to talk to 30 guys for a study around their experience in therapy, where they, have all of this backlog of shit that they're trying to cope with, and me trying to pass it out and make meaning of it with them. And even every day, when I get to do therapy in my pastime, because it's my spare job at the moment, just dipping in and being able to have that interaction. So I finished the PhD, and then I got a job at Movember, where I pretty much went to them and I said, much like many organizations, but they happen to be the biggest in this space, they go, men, you need to reach out, you need to talk more, you need to seek help. And I remember I had a discussion with the top guys there, and I said, you continue to tell guys to do this, and then what the fuck happens? What happens on the other side? You're just expecting that we close the door and all is well. And that's not how this game works. So I went in with a very clear idea that I wanted to shift up the mental health system to make it built with men in mind. And to make sure that when guys come in, they are getting something that is going to work, because it is so fucking hard to get them in. It costs so much money. How many fucking man cave sessions are we having to teach them about emotional literacy, that they then gain those skills? And then we end up in a situation where they come in, and then the therapist is like, why are you crying?
Totally. And the first step they take is, well, first of all, probably repression, and then get to bubbling and crisis point, and then, oh shit, I got to go see a psych now, and then that backs up the entire system. And then
the psych, goes, oh, you're suicidal? We can't handle you in private practice. And everyone, the distress is through the roof, especially at the moment. We know that young guys are just, and young girls, everyone is just going through it right now.
Yeah.
And so to suggest that we're going to work in, and I've got a gripe at the moment with the word prevention, because everyone is on a journey of recovery from birth. Birth is traumatic for mothers, for everyone. Yeah. So to suggest that we now are just going to prevent illness from happening, when you've got, 6-year-olds who are watching their dads beat up their mums. We've got serious trauma that is ongoing. It doesn't mean we have to give up. It just means don't expect that someone is coming in as a blank slate, and that you can go and you can teach them the basics of awareness of what mental health, looks like. This is depression, this is anxiety, and suggest that no one is actually experiencing this stuff, rather than expecting that they are, and starting as that as a base. So really went in with a mandate at Movember to try and expand that spectrum from, we're getting you to the point of looking after yourself, to this is how it will work, this is what will happen, this is how you should do it. And it's been just the best thing ever. I've met people like you, and I get to grow a Borat moustache once a year to look fucking horrible. And And I get to interact with community, and I also get to do the academic stuff on the side, where I can ask those questions. But now I get to go out and do advocacy and scream from the fucking rooftops about this stuff and make sure that everyone knows. And I'm brash and I'm blunt, and some people think that I'm an upstart, and I am fundamentally. And I don't really have an issue with that, because our field specifically is filled with 70-year-old white men. And I just think that it's time for new blood and new voices who actually are currently, hopefully, connected to youth and understand what is needed. That won't always be the case, and I will hand it down, you know, and I will pass on the baton. And that just doesn't seem to happen enough. You know, we were talking just before about mentors and how important that is. And there's been a history of holding on to power for dear life. Our generation cannot do that. So I believe so strongly in, you know, I end up being kind of a motivational coach when I'm doing therapy or supervising students or whatever, because it's like I want them to see their potential, and I want them to know that this status quo that they may or may not be in, which is filled with insecurity and indecision and self-doubt, is not the only way that you can be. There are so many other ways that you can enact, you know, your self-view. And someone just needs to scream that at some people every once in a while, you know?
Yeah, the system will continue as the system is until someone comes or many people come and break it down, or it gets to, literally the system gets to a crisis point. Yeah, absolutely. So inside of that, you've got your own self-awareness started to get cultivated young. You've got your lived experience from your own relationship with your father. You're in the weeds of just stats in university and being one of the only dudes in the room. And then now you it feels like when I'm with you, it's like you're in your sweet spot. Like you're happy to have gripes about things, which I think is a nice place to be, you know? It's like, this is my gripe that really fucking pisses me off.
And it changes every day.
Yeah. That's right. I said, oh, flat white. Oh, listen, there's many threads we can go down. And I think what I want to do in this is, because I'm interested in you as a person. And then I also want to get to like what we're starting to see on the ground with men. And, you know, I think we'll both have interesting perspectives on this, but I'll start with you as a person. Like when I feel you, when I think about you, there's like, I just think resilience, and that's such that word got hammered in the wrong way. Like it got so overused, like prevention, and it becomes almost this like marketing term. It's like when, you know, high performance started to come into vernacular and everyone's LinkedIn titles switched to high performance coach. And it was like, people realize you actually have to be in discomfort to actually achieve high performance.
Exactly.
Not just your title. Anyway.
It's the same as vulnerability.
Exactly.
Become a dirty word.
Exactly
dirty
the same.
Word. Yeah. And
then it becomes this like, I've heard someone describe it as like automated authenticity. So you like learn what to say, and then it's like, but then we know when someone's vulnerable. We know when it's like, we can feel it. And back to my point, I feel resilience in you. Is that something that is like, what's your story of building resilience?
Well, thank you for, you know, aligning me with resilience. I appreciate that. And I think I work really hard because I felt overwhelmed by my anxiety before.
Yeah.
That I have a very strong internal narrative of I will not be beaten, you know? And that is definitely something that was passed down by my mum.
Yeah.
You know, when Dad died, there was a very strong idea of you will continue. She never said it, but I cannot imagine another reality where we're all not thriving, you know?
Wow.
And everyone always says that my family is filled with overachievers. And I said, no, we're just achieving, you know? We're not doing any more than we should. We're doing exactly what we should be doing. And we were always loud. We were always obnoxious. You know, I almost got expelled for being a shithead, and it's my greatest strength. And thank God that someone in various places in school saw it and was willing to go, oh, you should go and act, or you should go and do this stuff, you know. But when it comes to resilience, I think I was already understanding my own limitations before Dad died. I understood and watched really intently how others interacted with me, what made me feel like shit, what made me feel empowered. I was always so attuned to what was going on in a certain room. And that's because I think potentially I'm a third sibling. And so I was always trying to I'm overly sensitive. Like, we have Friday night family dinners every week, and I'll leave most of the time with a stomach ache because it's just like there's too much shit going on. And I'm like, I'm the only one watching that my auntie is screaming at this person and no one cares. And I'm just like, oh my God, how is no one watching this? So it's a superpower and also my greatest weakness probably, because it only hurts me in the grand scheme. They actually don't give a shit. Yeah. They're fine. They leave, they're great. And I've just taken on all of this stuff. But resilience-wise, there is no other option, and there was very much it wasn't a stoic you'll get on with it, because we were always open and willing to talk about stuff. When Dad died, I sat down with all my siblings one day and I go, we need to fucking talk about this now. And they go, shut up.
How soon
it was real soon.
Yeah.
It was real soon. And I went into like, I'm a student of psychology and I'm going to tell you what's what. And I respected that so much that they, were like, we're on our own journey here and we're going to do what we're going to do. Because I was like, no, we're all the same person. We're going to do this in the way that the books say. And to watch that was probably one of my best learning experiences, to understand that resilience looks very different in different people. The way that my older brother dealt with it compared to my sister, who was 16 at the time, obviously looked very different. But they've still come through in a similar way. So I don't think that the process to resilience needs to be bottled up. It's realizing what the end point that you're striving towards looks like and how to get there. So very innately, I just believed that if I just keep trucking along and I build up things along the way, whether that be friends, whether that be achievements, whatever it may be, that I'll get to the point where I'm not full, because that will never necessarily happen, but I will be content with an understanding that I am enough, which is always my greatest fear. And I think for high achieving people, it is, which is just, where's the line? And I just keep moving the bar, So as I age, I'm really trying to get to the point where I can sit above or below the bar on any certain day, because it is constantly moving, and not just be thrown dependent on my mood.
Yeah, or the outside stimulus that comes in to attempt to throw you. Yeah, or it doesn't. We just moved into it. Yeah. Face first often. And I want to go back to anxiety too. So anxiety is something which is increasingly becoming more common, I think, because of the amount of, first of all, existential risk in the world, let alone I think the amount of social media that we take in, the lack of connection to things of natural sources, whether it's food, environment, social connection. What was your experience of anxiety and how do you describe it?
It's really intriguing that I've never done this. Like I've done it in my own therapy. Yeah. Everyone go to therapy. Yeah. But I talk with friends about it, but I just decided, obviously, as I was talking to you, that I'm like, anxiety is something I'm going to discuss, because believing again that your psychologist is immune in any way to this shit. I see anxiety as, and I'm going to try and not get overly academic, but I see it as a compared to depression, it is and they often come together. The vast majority of times they come together. I'm very lucky that I have never been depressed. I've witnessed it in my family members. But anxiety is a breakdown in your view of the future, and depression is of the past. So when you talk to someone who's depressed, they are fixated on something that happened previously very often. That wasn't good enough. I should have said this. I should have done that. And for someone who's anxious, they go, I need to do this. I need to do that. This will never be good enough, for instance. And so my experience very early on, and I'm very lucky, I have a PhD student called Krista who is looking into male anxiety at the moment, and she's the first in the world to do any analysis. She's already done 25 interviews with young dudes, 18 to 25, looking at their anxiety experiences. No one has done it. It's the most common thing in the world and no one's asking. Wow. So kudos to her. And there's stuff that she's finding out, which is why probably I'm now talking about it, is because she's like, they have had such a long journey of discomfort before they get anywhere. Like I was throwing up in school before exams, and the term anxiety is so normalized, which is beautiful in some ways, but it also means that, like, of course you're anxious. You're about to do a public speech.
Yeah.
Everyone should be. It's like, yeah, but I shouldn't be throwing up. You know, that shouldn't be something that's going on. And I'm very lucky that because I had a desire for self-betterment endlessly, and I was like, this thing will not beat me, and I will talk into the mirror in the morning and be like, this is how it's going to fucking go. But that's privilege, you know. That was the fact that I had a community, I had incredible friends and family and stability. So I know that that doesn't happen for everyone. So me going out and telling everyone to do this shit is not going to work. But I had a really strong, understanding that the way I was feeling was not okay. But it just seemed like everyone was probably going through it. So I knew that it was somewhat okay, but the extent of it still kind of feels like everyone probably had a similar thing. But I now realize that it's something that could have been handled probably much earlier than it was. The problem that often happens with people who are anxious and love achievement is that I believed for a very long time that my anxiety was the reason that everything was going well. Because if I don't get extremely anxious and study like a madman,
Right. Pain is the tool.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, God, we see that so often in high performers.
Always.
It's like whip yourself until you get the outcome.
For sure. And I've now switched that out for, cold showers and various other things.
And self-love.
Which is there's still always that, but it's like, how can you do that in small doses that are somewhat healthy rather than I'm going to go through 4 years of absolute hell.
Yeah. In silence.
Yeah, in silence. And it's funny, I remember the moment, I think I was on a date maybe 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, and I realized that if I just told her that I was losing it internally, something will shift. And so I was sitting there and I was like, I just love to project stability, and I think that that's something that everyone wants to do. And so I was doing it for so long, and I also realized that no one could ever tell, which is a really common thing. And so I understood that no one knew what was going on and no one would ever know. And so I was sitting there and my heart was racing and I was freaking out about whatever it may have been. And then I typically go, I just got to go to the bathroom to just go and have a breather and splash my face. But I just decided in that instant that I was just going to go, I'm freaking out. And it was a lot and it was hard to say. But then I realized, that's the superpower.
Yes.
Is just going, this is what's up, this is what's going on. And I forget sometimes to do that.
Yeah.
And there are certain contexts where I can't do that. But that means that I've gone from 5 out of 7 days to once a month.
Yeah.
Having a tough day. So I'm lucky for that.
I love that so much because I often share just as an internal principle I have, which is when in doubt, be authentic. And that doesn't necessarily mean say everything all the time. It's like read the social situation. But I had an example recently where I was on stage probably about 2 weeks ago to speak to 1,500 Year 12 students. And it's been overwhelming enough rocking up to...
Armed with tomatoes.
Yeah, and Snapchat. It's been a lot for me to work out how to reintegrate back into even social environments, let alone on stage at the exhibition centre in front of 1,500 students. And I was so nervous.
But you're Hunter Johnson.
Oh, you be the guy. Yeah, it's all good. So I walked up there and I've actually had a panic attack on stage before. I actually had to do a presentation to a corporate partner and I stayed up way too late the night before, got up early, and I remember midway through the presentation, my heart just started beating really fast, and I was like, what is happening here? And I actually thought I was having a heart attack. Gosh, and I was like, what? I've never had this experience before. It's in front of 150 people. And I just started to panic and I went, excuse me, I'm just going to grab a glass of water. And then I had a very similar moment to you. I just went, oh, fuck, I should just tell them. And I was like, sorry, this is the first time this has happened to me, but I actually think I need to sit down. My heart is overwhelmed, it feels like it's overwhelmed. Do you mind if I just have a few moments? And the audience was just like, yeah, dude, sit down.
How great. It's a full rotation of the earth that happens in that moment.
It was like the particles in the room changed, and I was like, oh my God. And I sat down in the front row and they were like, hey, just take as long as you want. I was like, can I just talk to you from here? And eventually my nervous system settled and I could finish it off. And the feedback was great for that session. But I personally learned something really powerful. That was to tell, just to tell where I'm at. And so at this thing 2 weeks ago, I walked on stage and I was like, oh God, they're up in like the rafters. And the first thing I said was, hey, it's really beautiful to be here. And also I'm just experiencing a bit of anxiety right now. So if I need to just slow down, or if I lose my train of thought or anything like that, it's just where I'm at. I'll hopefully pull myself together. Is that okay? And they all clapped and I was like, oh God, I did not see it going that well in my head, but that's a great outcome. And
if only everyone had those moments where they get a standing O for saying I'm anxious.
Well, I got a mate, I saw him do a talk recently and he talked about his erectile dysfunction and everyone clapped. And he was like, my dick just got a clap. He was like, this is a moment I will remember forever. Like, you got that, dude? He's like pointing down.
Good. No one will ever clap my dick.
No, that's what everyone else was left with. Like, they're like, oh my God. So I think what I want to bring it back to is what, in that moment, whether it's on stage with year 12s, getting your wiener clapped, or, you're on a date, just that sharing what's there, I think is a really powerful thing, because to your point, it changes something. And that is, for me, is true vulnerability and true authenticity.
So, there's definitely a difference between performative vulnerability and true vulnerability. Performative vulnerability being what I do most of the time, which is it doesn't touch the sides, and I'll get on to, which is why, this or talking with Dill, I'm always surprised, because I'm like, typically when I do a podcast and I've just decided, I'm going to talk about dad or I'll talk about something, it's not staged in any way. It's not inauthentic. It's just, it doesn't come from a place of current emotionality. Like, it's just not, here's a narrative that I've kind of told before and I can tell again, and people go, oh shit, that's heavy. And, that's why they feel like I'm giving them so much, and lots of people give back to me. But personally, that just doesn't lead me anywhere necessarily. And so I think we've discussed that I went through a stage where I would do a lot of that, and I was like, no one sees me. No one actually understands me. I'm like, but I am sharing. I'm like, I'm sharing everywhere. I tell everyone about everything. But it's not what I'm actually grappling with, for instance. It's something I've already wrapped up with a bow.
Yeah.
And so that's performative vulnerability, and that's something that, psychologists talk amongst themselves of saying that we're vulnerability salesmen. We can do this shit for days, and it's our special sauce in many ways, and we're very lucky to have that. It means that I can go into a room and talk to anyone, and I can give and take, and it feels very genuine and lovely. But I have to have those true places where I can go. And so, that true vulnerability is when you haven't dealt with it, or you haven't thought about it in great depth, or you haven't said it out loud to anyone before. And that's the new shit, and that's the stuff that we need to let out a bit more. And I think that there is, we can talk about men, not having the words for some of this stuff, not having lots of people say we don't have the mechanism, the engineering. I'm like, that is fucking not true. It is pure practice.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. And the practice is the thing that breaks down endless barriers. Like, I can literally feel when I'm about to say something, just all of those, it's like Roadrunner, all those signs that I'm just running through before I get off the cliff. Like, it's like, oh shit, I know where this is going.
Yeah.
And I have to break through each of those. And each of them are frightening, but they become less and less, and there's just no friction anymore. I go brain to mouth very seamlessly now, if you couldn't tell. And I can see it whirring for others, and I try to coach them through that process, especially in a safe space like therapy or with my mates or whatever, where we can, where they can feel each of those barriers falling, because they're terrifying and no one should underestimate them. And we know where they come from. They come from years of your dad not doing it, years of everyone at school bullying you anytime you say anything. They come from girls not clapping for your wiener but laughing at it. They come from so many different shame-filled places. And we need to get to a place where we can understand that the best way to counteract shame is by just facing it and just calling it for what it is, rather than all of that other behavior, which is violence, which is narcissism, which is just projecting Donald Trumpian, Weinstein-esque behavior, which is complete and utter fear. And when I talk to, and this is the problem is that we've spoken about various other guys who fill up this space and they go, take back your power, take back your privilege. And I'm kind of saying the same thing. I'm just saying it in a way that's not go and do this in a destructive way. It's go and do it in an open manner that is going to benefit everybody, which is that if we can face up to this stuff that is eating away at us, and we can fundamentally go, this is not the way I want to be perceived, this is not, and I don't need to backlash. I can say what it is, and I can overcome it with other people. Terrifying, but you'll get a standing O.
The caveat inside of that for me is that, like, be responsible with, like, your vulnerability tokens. You know? Because it's like, the reality is you may have your equivalent experience of high school where you put your hand up, get the question wrong, and everyone laughs at you. What do you learn? Don't put your hand up. And it's like, we've countless examples of opening up and then someone doesn't know how to be with it and they say the wrong thing, and then what do we learn? Oh shit, I don't do that. I think the masculine experience is riddled with that. And then also, like, again, vulnerability is not the silver bullet in healing the world. It's a fucking important part, but it can't be seen, in my point of view, as the silver bullet, because there does need to be times where we are stoic as all hell.
For sure.
And increasingly more so, but what is our respective healing practices? Whether that is having a space to share, whether that is our own journaling or breath work or cold showers or trauma healing practice, whatever that is for you. But it's like, and this is what I find very interesting about particularly me. It took me a really fucking long way to get there and still going. But like, I use the language like playing offense with my mental health versus defense. And we talked about that, I think, on the Dill potty. I realized for so long I was so reactive, and it was like, wait till something goes wrong or gets to, I'm too overwhelmed, and then I need to change everything. I'm in control, and then the cycle just goes again. But it's like, great, how do I literally know this is an inevitable outcome, knowing my personality type, and what am I going to do about it? And kind of build these functions into my year, my calendar, my relationships. Do you see that play out inside? Yeah.
Everywhere. There are two things gripes I need to pick up on. The first is, I completely agree, the idea that it's like you need to be careful with where you open up and how. And that doesn't mean, withholding until the crisis, obviously. But it does mean that instead of putting the responsibility more on men, because everyone again is doing that, to go, boys and guys, you need to get it together and you need to just open up willy-nilly. Not going to work. Instead, society, teachers, parents need to understand how to hold, full stop. Because if they can't hold that moment, if they can't hold that space, if they have no idea how to respond to this stuff, what we found, we've done this research at Movember that shows over 40% of guys regret telling anyone about their mental health.
Wow. That is a big stat.
It's huge. It's huge. And it is so common to the point where it's also in therapy. It's like the vast majority of guys drop out prematurely. They have a shit time and they do not come back. And as a result of not coming back, we see them in ED. We see them in ambulances. And so what needs to happen instead, because you end up with this idea, which is really frightening. So we did a follow-up where we go, all right, you drop out because you've had a bad time, because you have really skewed expectations of what therapy should be, which is a silver bullet and one session and you're good to go.
Yeah.
That's on me to tell you it's going to take time. And that's on society to educate, again, not to go to therapy. What is therapy? How does it work? What happens? How does it, function in your life? I always say that it's personal training. You don't do 1 hour of exercise a week and believe that you're going to lose weight. It's just not going to happen. And so understanding where it fits in your rituals is really important. But if they get to the point where they are dropping out of therapy, what we find longitudinally, like after a couple months or years, they actually end up believing that nothing can help them. So they go, I tried, It didn't work. It sucked. No one understands me. Why would I ever try that again? And that is the most dangerous place to be.
Wow.
When you have someone who's depressed, who doesn't believe that anything can help, that's why we have the male suicide rate where we do.
And it also plays into the loneliness that a lot of men feel. And like, a lot of the research which Movember's done, which I've read and a lot of Man Cave uses is around the loneliness of men, particularly over the age of 30. Huge.
Yeah.
Mind just sharing a bit more about that?
For sure.
Yeah.
I think it is across the board the most common problem that the guys are dealing with at the moment, which is to say that we all feel it when we left school. There starts to be this point where you go, who am I? What's going on here? Our relationships weren't actually built on anything other than shared experience potentially, or footy, or whatever it may be. Whereas all of the girls are going off and cultivating these beautiful, strong bonds, we've got banter and they've got connection. And I was like, fuck that. That doesn't seem fair. And so, especially you go through uni and you get to the point when you get to your 30s where lots of, guys are having kids. And what we realize is that despite women maintaining their number of friendships over time, men's continues to drop, to the point where we ended up with the majority of guys over the age of 60 saying they have no one that they can call on or talk to in a tough time, which is just devastating.
It's tragic.
And so common. Like you think of, fathers and grandparents, and they're just waiting for a call. My grandpa, and he's 93, he's got all of us and we call him all the time, but it's still not enough for him. He just wants to be nourished. All his mates are dead, And I think we spoke about this last time, that the one thing, if you look at this Harvard study of guys who were born in the 30s and who's still alive, friends. They could smoke like chimneys, and only the ones with friends are still alive. It literally nourishes the soul.
Yeah.
It keeps your heart going.
And I want you to keep going, but the asterisk I want to put that is it was the depth and the quality of their
and
relationships.
Don't smoke.
Yeah.
Shit.
We've got a new sponsor.
Of course. Depth and quality.
I think that's important.
Definitely not pure numbers. And that's what I was saying. Banter will only get you so far.
Yeah.
And we're all aware of that now.
I also think we're at this interesting time where a lot of guys are seeking the depth, but also either their existing social network of blokes or, mates, whatever. It's almost like the Titanic of the culture of how they have always been, whether it's from shared experiences, the weekends, 21st, traveling to South America, whatever it is like the bonding tool. And then they're now at this point where they might be having families soon, like crises are happening, pandemics are happening. Who knows? We've got another economic crisis about to happen. And they're seeking but can't find it in existing groups. And now it's like, well, where do they go? Do you Google your local men's group?
Straight up. That's happening. Yeah. Which is awesome, thankfully. And shout out to incredible groups like Mr. Perfect and, barbecue meetups and all that type of stuff. And thank God that there are some men who are willing to do that type of thing and broaden out. But that shit's scary as well.
Yeah.
So what I'm witnessing is that there are two things that often happen here, which is that you exist within a status quo and you just stay there and you go, this is uncomfortable. I've got friends who, we've discussed bucks parties multiple times. One went to one on the weekend. He was there. He was extremely uncomfortable. He smiled. He got through it. And he was like, why are there 10 strippers here? This is not what I want. This is not who I am. I'm having a serious values clash. But his mentality goes, I need these guys. So, and that's completely fair. Ostracism is, when it comes to humanity, belonging is everything. If you don't have that, you got nothing. So that's one way. The other way is to go, I'm going to try and be the catalyst for change here. And I've tried that with various groups and it's been successful with some and not with others, to the point where I've been kicked out of WhatsApp groups when they're sharing porn and I'm like, this is fucked. What are you doing? It's the middle of the workday, let alone this is never appropriate. And they're like, stop being so serious. And I'm exited from the WhatsApp group. So that's been one example. And the other is that I've introduced a shared language, something somehow that provides tools to go, all right, I've opened the door. someone come with me. And I'm very lucky that I have friends. And I'm also very lucky that I just don't take no for an answer. And so I pull, kicking and screaming, my friends along the way. That is exhausting. I have openly said to my friends that I'm exhausted by the very act of having to do this. And I fully comprehend that I am trained to literally do that type of thing for strangers. So I can do it for my friends, but you're an everyday dude. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
You know?
And also for your circumstance, you're also a human being who needs to top up. And I feel anyway, there's a different mode of being when you're around your social friends, opposed to like, okay, I'm stepping into psych here, or you know, this is my mode of work, which is what I do. It's interesting you talk about it's really just for me being brave enough to say something and to go, hey, we need an intervention here, whether that is naming something in the WhatsApp group, or if it is going to your friends, hey, let's fucking do something about this. It's going to be weird, it's going to be awkward, it's going to be clunky, but we need to practice and we need to do this. And then, but for me, it also, what comes up is like, it sounds like such a good idea, but then the actual execution of it, life happens, things get busy, but and this is what I notice in my own conditioning. I have to like check myself, because there's always going to be another priority. There's always going to be something that will distract me from wanting to step forward and do that. So I think it's really coming back to that. How do you play offense and actually drive it forward? And, you know, whether it's send a podcast to someone as the opening and go, cool, let's just discuss this, and thinking about the entry point into the conversation. I actually talked about this with Chanel Contos, and she challenged me on that, saying, you know, I've been in previously in Instagram groups or WhatsApp groups where a lot of things have been shared and I felt uncomfortable, and it was quite a few years ago. I'm not in them now, but she was like, well, did you say anything? And I said, no, my fear was at the time, as like a 23, 24-year-old, that I'd be kicked out of the group, I'd be paid out, I'd be seen as better, and that I had it all together and they knew shit in my life. Right? Fucking did not.
Amen.
And so like, I don't necessarily have the answer here, because I think it's very, you know, situation orientated, group specific, but I just think it's worth airing that out, because I don't hear it talked about often. Next thing I want to go back to, because I think this is one of the most important skills, is this concept of holding that you mentioned before. Let's talk about holding space. What do you mean by that?
I think it is sold as an extremely even when you relay it back to me, I'm like, I cringe a little, you know, because the term...
Not just at me, right?
But there's definitely something to be said for potentially finding a new term for it that doesn't scare guys off, because it definitely does in many instances, because it's perceived as it's a soft skill. It really is. And men don't do soft skills in many instances. They're not trained in them and they're not respected. But holding space in my world often is silence. You know, we talk about this at Movember all the time when we're talking about Movember conversations and how to have meaningful conversations, is that everyone always jumps in with solutions. So holding space in its core, you know, skill really is, if a mate is unloading on you, don't cut him off. Don't tell him that everything will be okay. Don't tell him what he needs to do next. Don't offer a therapist immediately. Don't do all of these things that our brains are telling us. You know, it's the masculine way is to attempt to solve something, and believing that the solution is in time and maturation and just airing stuff out. I think is always underestimated. And so, holding space, I think when I'm, you know, even you do it so well. It's like if I say something heavy, I can always tell that you take a beat. You know, and I don't think that that's purely for Oscar-winning purposes, but there is something to be said for going, I hear how difficult that was, and there are different ways of showing that, or I hear, you know, that means so much to you, and I'm willing to sit here with you in that. What I often say, you know, in therapy, is that I will climb down the ladder with you, but I won't go all the way to the bottom, and I will hold my arm out and I will pull you back up, you know? And I think too many guys go all the way down and then you're fucking sinking in the mud. I will hold on to the ladder and I will hold on to you. And I think that we need to understand that it's such a beautiful thing that men do. We've seen it in the Northern Rivers.
Yeah.
Literally, these Fijian blokes just fucking carrying kids, buildings, anything they can grab a hold of. And it's life-saving. It's happening in Ukraine. It's happening everywhere. But who holds them?
Yeah.
And so if anything, if we can get to the point where we've got a ladder of guys just interlocking arms and pulling each other up, that's where we need to go. And that's what holding space is. Holding space isn't, I'll come down and I will sink in the shit with you, because you do not have the ability to get back out then. So believing that you can't share your own stuff when you're holding space, though, is not true. Like, that's probably one of the core things here, which is that you're not there to outdo them, but just going, yeah, man, I know. Even I know is something that people just don't say. They always go, oh, I'm going to be the one to look after you now. And that guy goes, fuck that. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to. And that's why no one does it, versus reciprocity. Let's have a reciprocal discussion around, I am constantly on a journey of self-discovery. I'm constantly on a journey of suffering and enjoyment. That's life.
It's a tagline of being human.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. I've said to so many dads, especially, it's funny doing a lot of parenting. I do a lot of couples therapy and stuff, and I make clear from the outset, I don't have kids. I'm not an expert when it comes to coupledom. In saying that, when I am in couples therapy, it's like I see clearly what is going on here. And if I'm in my own relationship, like, what the fuck is going on? It's like, from a distance, it's like, that is all wrong. And I'm in it. And I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm doing everything wrong. It happened again. But there is, when I talk to dads, I always go, we're getting to the point where, and mates as well, where you are willing to go, I struggled too.
Yes.
And they go, you were 16, I'm 16. It's tough. This is a really tough world. When I was a kid, I got bullied, and they talk about this, but they talk about everything in past tense. And we need to get to the point where we can have a discussion where everyone is going, I am still trying to work out what the fuck is going on. People, and I am not that good at it either. When I'm talking to somebody about something that I've been through, I don't discuss that it probably plagued me yesterday. That I'm still trying to piece it together. Instead, I go, I beat that. But I went through it, but I beat it. And that's the discussion of male mental health at the moment, which is that various footy players come out and they say, I struggled with anxiety, And we're getting slowly, I'm seeing little examples of people saying, I'm dealing with this day to day and this is what I do. But we need to understand that there is no end point to any of this, and that there is no illness. This is just life. We talk about normalizing mental health issues. It's like you are expected to go through this stuff. Yeah? If you don't, I have no idea how. Have you hidden in a room on your own with no TV?
Yeah.
Because you can turn on the TV and my heart will start racing.
Yeah.
That's it. So I think that starting to reinvent that narrative to go, it's constant, it'll come at you, and all you need is good people around you, some skills, and to open your mouth when the time comes.
Yeah. And it's a marathon. Like, let's just pull it back to that. You are not sprinting anywhere. It is literally setting yourself up for a marathon. So how do you do that? You train for a while. I think it's just like, that's such a simple thing. The next part as well, which I want to come back to what you said, and is that element of not needing to rescue someone, I think is really important. And just to bring that up, it's like, definitely in your experience and in my experience, it's most people don't want advice. They don't want to be told what to do. They just want the space to speak their truth and be heard. And part of that is, if you are listening to someone speak that truth, it's being really conscious of what is it you're about to say to them, and being like, you're not always going to get it right, and that's all part of this, but feel free to name you're fumbling through it. It's like, hey, I really care about you, and I also don't know what to say, but I think, how can I help you?
I'm here, and I will continue to be here.
Yeah.
and I will fuck it up, but I will
Yeah.
be here. And
Yeah.
you can know you'll call me. I don't know what I'll say when I answer, but
Yeah.
I will pick up.
Yeah.
That is largely, in my experience, working in suicide prevention, that's why Lifeline exists.
Yeah.
So that someone will answer your fucking call.
Yeah.
So, so often I say, and during Movember, I always say, on the radio, they go, what's something that we should be telling people to do? And it's like, I can talk about moustaches for days.
Yeah.
I love a moustache pun, but I get to a point where I'm like, I've had my fun. It's like the 20th of November, and I'm like, my upper lip is itchy. I don't want to deal with this.
I look like Chopper Reed.
Yeah. And I always go get your phone and just call 5 randoms. Call 5 of your mates that you haven't spoken to in however long, and just have a 5-minute chat. And and there's so many examples in movies where someone calls someone and they're like, are you dying? That should not be the case. If we can get to a point where you can call a mate and they can't go, what's wrong? They go, oh, thank God. Awesome. I needed this. That'll be a win.
Yeah, nice. And if you're like me, I literally need to write people's names out and have them on my desk. Like they're literally on Post-it notes, like my core people who are in my life, because otherwise I know in my nature I just get fucking busy doing whatever I'm doing, and I go, oh shit, my relationships are dropping off. So now it's like, and I've played around with this, I've put it as a calendar invite, and I'm like, nah, it feels too much like work. I should not do that. But just having it physically there, so then if I know it, I can consciously choose if I'm going to engage with it or not, opposed to just the blinkers coming on.
And it's too easy to get really guilty about that as well.
Yeah.
And be like, why is this not front of mind?
Yeah.
Why is this not? And it's like, because this is how life works. And there's nothing wrong with that, to put in rituals around how this works and to prioritize it one way or another. It's not always going to be front of mind. It'll come in weird and wonderful ways in the middle of the night. And you need to just ride that out. But believing that if I don't call this person, then I'm a bad friend, and now I'm not going to call them because now I'm a bad friend.
And I'll avoid it, and then that'll become another thing that I'm hiding behind, trying to pretend everything's okay.
Exactly. And then you end up alone and sad, and all of the things that you actually... This is fundamentally, I cannot handle this. This happens here's a gripe. We should rename this gripe.
The gripe.
Stuff gripe. Stuff to gripe about is especially when my mates are dating, and, the games that always happens.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I'm going to wait for her to text or something like that. This happens with clients as well. I'm like, is that what you want? Do you want her to not think that you care? And I do this with friends. When I'm messaging, it's like, oh, he hasn't messaged me in however long. And then we end up playing this game, and then we never talk. And it's like, bite the bullet and do what you are supposed to do. Do what you feel like doing. And, there's that whole... trope around women not asking men out, for instance, and I live with 2 women, and I'm constantly, I come home, they're like, oh, I don't know what to do here. I'm like, just ask him. He's waiting. That's all he wants. It's like assertive women, hottest thing ever. It's like, how do we get to the point where, what are your intentions, and just act on those rather than all of the self-doubt which wins out.
It's a short and long-term game, speaking your truth, because if you speak it in that moment, it's actually quite liberating for you. And if that person can't be with that, and that they then end the relationship, that's probably in your better interest.
So much easier when people go, oh my God, you put yourself out there. Isn't that scary? I'm like, I'd rather know.
Yeah.
I just threw it out there, and then they go, not feeling it. I'm like, thank God, rather than 3 days of just biting my fingers off, trying to be like, oh, does she care? Does she not? It's like, what's the point in that? It just makes no sense to me. So I think if you put it out there with good intent, whatever happens is how it was supposed to be in that moment. And that's sweet. And I think that's like the core of psychology, which is that if you can get to the point where you can hear that inner voice and you can trust it.
Yes.
If you can allow that out, you're just going to be happier. Even if someone rejects you, whatever it may be, it doesn't hurt as much because at least you went, I threw it out, I gave it a go.
Yeah, and the inner voice, I think we've been trained out of listening to the inner voice. It's like it's almost been outsourced. You can't trust yourself. And I just think about some of the most profound decisions, like insights, connection points in my life have come from my inner voice.
Trains and planes. That is where it's at for me.
Yeah, totally.
My
no
God,
distractions.
None. I love it so much.
Yeah.
Like I died during lockdown because I couldn't fly aimlessly.
No one could get you on a flight.
Yeah. I was like, when the borders open, I was like, if I go to Perth, that's 5 hours. I could just do return and just keep flying and just work shit out. Like, give me some fucking space in a capsule. Please,
Yeah. It's very true. I want to talk about fatherhood and this element of parenting, and because I don't often hear, like, it's starting to be a bit more common now, but like dads groups or men's groups or those who identify as male in supporting young kids. What are you seeing on the front line of fathers, and anything you want to share about that?
I'm an uncle.
Which
I'm stoked about.
Sick.
So I'm watching fatherhood in my brother right now, and he's doing a great job. Go Jono. But I think that fatherhood is, so many people talk about it as a risky time, but I actually think it's the most protective time for men. If they have done that's women have 9 months, 10 months because their body is having to deal with what the fuck is going on. Everyone goes, what am I supposed to do as a guy? It's like that time is equally important for you to grasp and grapple with who you are and who you want to be and what you want to project to your future child and what type of father you want to be. That time cannot be thrown away. It is so important. And I think that more and more men are starting to understand that, because they always go, oh God, the child's here now and I have no idea what.
How did this happen?
Exactly. It's always like they were not there and now they're here. And it's like, now I'm a dad. It's like, no, there has to be an understanding that period of time is identity formation time.
Yeah.
And is to go, it's not time for an existential crisis because the kid is coming regardless.
Yeah.
Don't have a breakdown, but try to get to the point where you have meaningful conversations with people that you love. Talk to your partner about parenting and who you want to be as a father. Talk to your father if they're alive, or your grandfather around. I hate that idea of like, it happens so much on like International Women's Day. It's like 60-year-old women saying like, what I wish I did when I was 18. It's like, I understand now that there's obviously a huge shift where these women weren't able to do it, but dads have been able to do shit forever. We've had privilege for as long as we found out the other day that the vast majority of guys aren't taking paternity leave. That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
You got 2 weeks, they're paying for you. What are you doing? And the vast majority of them aren't taking it.
Why do you think that is?
Oh, corporate ideals. It's, I think, seen as weakness in some places. The vast majority of dads go, I don't know what to do with that time. So that's where, if you plan out those months beforehand, where you go, this is what this means to me, this is what I want to do, this is what these few weeks of bonding are going to look like, at least you can be purposeful. But yeah, there's just not enough support across the sector. Other male role models, it always comes down to that. You should have managers going, I'm taking leave. We've got the Premier who's on leave at the moment, and he got a lot of shit for that as well. So if you can have more and more, guys and women coming out being like, I needed my partner there. Watching my brother and his wife now, she keeps saying, I cannot imagine being a single mum. This is terrifying and overwhelming. And thank God he's there to wipe up shit at 3 a.m, and so if we can have those narratives being like, dads, you are useful. And I come at it from a health sector perspective, which goes, oh, you've gone in to the hospital and the nurse has told you to leave. Has gone, I'll just speak to the mother. What does that do?
Yeah.
How undermining is that for, all right, you've just reaffirmed my belief that I'm useless in this setting because I can't breastfeed. And so I don't need to learn anything. Or they talk directly to the woman and there's no use for the guy. The whole system is just perpetuating the problem.
Yeah. I got a mate who works at a construction company, and their whole thing was to advertise like how good their paternity leave was, but no one took it.
Oh my
and
God.
Then he took it and it was not received well.
Yeah.
And so again,
they're like, no, it's a byline.
Yeah.
It's in size 6 font for a reason.
That's right. But it's just like, and this is, I think it comes back to that. This again, I just like airing this out because I think it should be talked about. But like, there's these cultural challenges where we say one thing, but then the environment in which to make that decision makes it so difficult. And of course you can go, you know what, you just choose that anyway. And also, what are we doing about the environment? Because we need to address this. We can, and this is, I often think when it's people who are somewhat well educated or opinionated come onto platforms, they go, this is what needs to be done. And it's like, well, have you been down to the construction site?
Exactly.
Because it's not fucking gonna land.
No.
And again, it's like, I don't know the solve on that, but I just want to give it airtime.
Yeah, we need to have more of these conversations, not in obscure, distant settings, and that's typically what happens. And that's why, you look at the mental health sector full stop, and there's a lot of people who are the face of this thing, who have never been in the dirt, And I understand that my circumstance by no means is anywhere near as, it's real, but it's nowhere near as potentially, troubling as someone who's going through it right now or whatever it may be. Circumstances are very different, but I'm willing to go out and sit there with someone. I was so privileged to work in Darwin for a bit, where I went out, and that threw out my model of therapy full stop, where I was like, oh yeah, you'll come here, this 11-year-old Indigenous boy, and we'll do an hour sitting down across from each other and we'll talk one-on-one. And he's like, no, you're going to come out bush and we're going to sit under a tree for 4 hours and I'm going to tell you the longest story of all time. And then eventually you'll get the nugget. And I'm like, fucking hell. And it was like that idea of being in someone else's space where they're allowing you in, and going, here is a different way of doing things. That is exactly what you're talking about. We can talk about the climate in certain settings that are so, we can sit in metropolitan Sydney and talk about floods, but how can we go and talk to the people and learn from them and ask them what they need and find a way to actually make meaningful change? That just doesn't happen often enough by any means. I sound like I'm running for parliament now.
Yeah, he winks at the camera. That's very good. So just some practical 101s, mate. I want to bring it into us taking care of ourselves better. What's some low-hanging fruit here for people to grab onto?
I'm an evangelist when it comes to rituals. I believe so strongly in rituals. You used to see me at the beach every day. It's like, and I understand that not everyone has the beach right near them, but there is always something that you can build in that is going to be a grounding exercise of sorts. I think I've told you I eat the same muesli every day. I think I randomly at some point compared myself to Steve Jobs, which was a very poor decision. Where I was just like, I don't have time. I wear the skivvy, I was like, oh, Jesus, this is a bad decision. So I'm not Steve Jobs by any means, but I do understand, Barack Obama talks about that as well. I think that idea of creating really clear structures so that the world in its fucked up ways can do everything else around you and you won't necessarily be as phased. Yeah,
you simplify your cognitive load, I think is what that is. Yeah,
exactly. So that's really important. I also, we were talking before around how when things get really tough, you start to go, all right, I go into mode where I'm going to pick up this thing and start to build it into my life. And I often talk to people about exercise, for instance, where they go, or diet, where they go, it's a tough time now. I've just started to put on weight. I'm going to reintegrate exercise into my life. It's like, these things shouldn't come and go. How can you find a way to create a ritual where there is no question that on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday, you do something where you get up in the morning, and so many people, this is why everyone listens to various podcasts and, influencers and whatever, because they're trying to go, what is the special way of doing this? How do people manage to pull this off? It is literally repetition. It is repetition. And the thing that I often do is I don't go, which is a bit cooked. I go, I'm going to do this. And then my internal voice goes, but I don't want to. And I never listen to that, which is, and that's tough. And that took a lot of training for me to just be like, it's not about want right now, because I will want it in retrospect. And so I do a lot of, believing in utility of things, which is that there is real use in me doing this activity right now, whether I want to or not. And I wholeheartedly throw myself into it, whether it's diet, exercise, whatever it may be, because I understand where it sits and how successful it has been. And so something that people don't do enough of, we're really good at talking about how injured we are, how difficult that run was, how, and we don't do enough of, this is something that I'm doing in a healthy way, and I'm going to tell everyone about it in a way that it's going to just lead to it being a part of my personality.
Nice.
I often talk about, and I think it was Osher Gunsberg, I was about to say Andrew G. God forbid, who talked about like ritualistic lying. And I did this back in the day where I would say that it was probably the start of lockdown where I was like, I swim every day and I have a cold shower every day, whatever it may be. And I was lying for like the first month. I would do it 4 or 5 times a week. And then I got to the point where I was like, I probably need to live up to this because there's enough people who live around here
Wait a minute.
who are seeing me. And so it's aspirational lying where I'm like, I'm going to talk, and there are so many instances where there's, beautiful, incredible entrepreneurs who go, I'm going to create a company that changes the world. And they just said it over and over and over again. And you need certain ingredients for that to come off. But in your small microcosmic world, if you continue to say something over and over again that's really small, which is that I'm going to meditate every day, and you tell everyone, you'll get to the point where you feel so guilty that you have to fucking do it, that you have to do it because it has become something that you are now hanging your hat on.
Absolutely. And I'm probably a little bit more spiritual than some listening to this, but I absolutely believe that you speak it into existence because you create it as a possibility, and then your subtle behaviors and your environment around you brings it forward. They interact. There's some other, in how I view the world, some other cosmic things at play that kind of, if it's aligned with you and your values and you really want it, it often comes off in a really unconventional way. Yeah.
For sure.
The other things I wanted to just add into that 101, which again, I don't hear talked about too often, is just listen to your body. Like the intelligence of the body for me outweighs the mind. Like it's like the body is this has no concept of time, but it's in touch with feelings, like the environment around us. But again, I think in 2022, at least in my upbringing, I was never educated to trust my body. And if I think about any situation I've been uncomfortable in my life, my body knows before my brain does. And now I'm just starting to learn to act more from my gut and my body's intelligence. So I think listen to your body, and that might just take a little while too. Some other good things, again, I don't hear talked about. Sometimes when I can feel I'm getting a bit overwhelmed, I'll write down 2 lists. One is a list which is a clearing list, which is conversations I need to have with people. So I'm like, it might be me, I didn't get back to that person, or it might be someone said something that I've just felt uncomfortable with, whatever it is. And I write that down, and I actually try and clock those things off the list. And then it's unbelievable the cognitive lightening that happens after that. And the second is what I call an integrity list, where I just write down the areas of my life where I'm out of integrity. And for me, that basically just means what do I know I'm doing that I shouldn't be doing, or as often? And again, I don't look at that with any judgment, and that's taken a little bit of time and practice, but I'm able to just gamify it and just tick it off. And sometimes I don't get through the whole list, but even if I get through 2 or 3 of those items, I feel lighter. So I think that's a really simple way to just, again, release the amount of stress that subtly gets built up in our unconscious. And a real simple one, again, is I've got a shoebox of affirmations and love notes to myself.
Oh, good.
Yeah, which actually is also, if people have written
I'm going to write you one.
Yeah, yes.
Note this
That's
up.
actually why I did this whole podcast. But that's just stuff that's been accrued over the years too. So it's, if I've done something and someone's written me a nice note, it's in there.
And when you're running low.
And when I'm running low, it's this cookie jar of emotional top-ups. And I reckon I pull it out maybe twice a year. But I see it, it's on the back. If I'm in any Zoom calls, you can see it at the back. So it's this tokenistic ritual reminder. And again, I had to get over these fears of this is super lame and oh my God, what a loser. And then I was like, oh man, I'm just telling myself what I really needed. I'm the boss.
No, that's great. I think that's really important. And leaning into those moments of just being I'm all right. Sitting with some positivity as well, especially when I'm at a low ebb, when it's not feeling that way. It's really weird that when you call someone with an issue and you're feeling pretty low, they'll try and deal with the issue rather than try and affirm you as a human being, which is really what you need.
Nice.
They're like, here's a solution to the problem. I'm like, no, I feel like a piece of shit.
Yeah.
There's a big issue here.
That's the symptom.
Yeah. I'm just throwing this thing at you about work. It's not about that.
Yeah.
Talking about lists, another list that I have is a not to do list.
Oh, good.
Is because, there's my to-do lists are out of control, and there's just always more and more and more. And especially when more people come to me for various things and everyone wants a bite, I continue to add to this thing, and making clear when I'm at a position where I'm really uncertain about myself and I'm like, oh, it's ego or various things are getting in the way, where I'm like, should do that, I should write that book, I should do this thing. And I've very clearly got, when I'm in a calm, rational state of mind, where I've said, those are no-goes right now. You don't want to go and do that thing. You don't want to work with some influencer on some wellness thing that has no meaning behind it and is just going to be selling your soul, because you'll feel like shit. It's the same integrity thing that goes on there. So, yeah.
That's also for me boundaries, which again, I don't hear talked about enough in a real practical way. I just did an exercise probably about 2 days ago where I sat, closed my eyes and felt into what was my little boy, my inner child's, why was he scared of setting boundaries? And then I heard, I listened to the inner part of me talk about a situation that happened, and he tried to set a boundary and he got hurt from it, and then he went, okay, no boundaries. And then I did my teenager, when I was in high school, what was the challenge there? And then I did when I was a younger man, so in my early 20s, and I got to just kind of map out. I was like, oh shit, there are all these little moments where the younger parts of me went to step forward and do it, and then they got shut down. And I was like, oh, cool. So I went back and just literally empathized with those parts of myself, of my psyche. And then I recommitted to setting boundaries in my life, which traditionally has not come easy because I'm a yes guy. I'm a people person.
I don't want to miss out.
I don't want to miss out. Yeah. And I remember I made this choice. I'd rather have connection than actually say my truth and be rejected. And that was some subtle decision that I'd made. And now I'm like, oh shit, I'm actually never alone. That's a big thing I got. And then secondly, by me speaking my truth and setting a boundary, if it leads to momentary discomfort, ultimately it leads to longer term comfort. And that took me a while to get, but and that's kind of something I'm just trying to work on at the moment. But I think bringing it back to this little toolkit we've created here is personal boundaries are really important to honoring your own emotional needs and how you show up.
They're also, they've been owned out of necessity by women. Boundaries have been a reactive response to sexual abuse, violence, all of the shit that's out there, where women have had to own boundaries, and it's a dirty word.
Yeah.
It's preventing shit from happening to you rather than proactively planning for how I'm going to be my best self. It's how do I stop danger rather than how do I prevent myself from, getting into various places where I don't need to be. So I think that, again, that's just a whole pivot, a massive shift in just the vernacular around what these terms are and how they can be used. And if you can get to the point, I always say, if we can get to the point where this is just commonplace in the way that dudes are talking to each other.
Yeah.
I always talk about, I would love to get to the point where I'm on a bus and I hear dudes talking about their therapists to one another. It's always physios. Damn physios. Everyone wants to talk about their physio. He's so good, man. He's great. But it's just we're coming for you. But I'd love to get to the place where we can just go, and you don't sit on the bus and talk about your trauma and the depth of it, but just to go, man, it was great. I just unburdened, and this is how it works and this is what happened. That'd be sick.
That'd be awesome. And I do think we're starting to see more of that happen, even conversations that we're having here, in the convos we've had on Deal and Friends, what that's opened up as well. And, definitely the episode we debuted on this potty with list cloggers as well. It was unbelievable to witness the amount of direct messages that, Dill, Dan and Stuff got from that. So I think there are a lot of guys who are wanting to change, and now it's just how do we tip that into being a real cultural shift, not just the individuals.
I want to get to the point, there's a discussion in society that thank God for the next generation, and I wholeheartedly agree. And I don't want to be handing them the shit show that we are, existing in at the moment. But you cannot forget that there is rehabilitation and growth that can happen for everyone else. So don't pin all of your hopes, because that's too much for your 12-year-old boy to handle right now. You need to believe that the 30 and 40-year-old men are not beyond hope, are not beyond empowerment, are not beyond changing by any means. Don't give up on them.
I think that's a great place to leave it.
Thanks, mate.
Mate, always a pleasure. I feel like we can go on many, many different tangents, but I just want to say thank you, dude, for, you know, someone who's in the trenches in a different way to you. I really do appreciate everything you do. I love that we can kind of laugh our way through this too and make fun of ourselves. We'll also learn a bit about each other, but also ourselves. Be like, fuck, never thought about that. I'm just excited to see where, you know, our friendship, but also your journey goes to, man. So thank you.
Love it. Cheers.